We are jumping straight into the source material this week, which covers a massive amount of legislative activity up on Capitol Hill.
A really dense week.
It was. Our focus is squarely on the key actions, the defining debates, and the crucial personnel decisions that filled the schedule during that intense period of December 8th through the 11th, 2025.
Yeah, a very consequential 4 days that really set the tone for the rest of the year.
It did. And before we get into the details, if you find these tailored briefings helpful, please just take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps us keep bringing you this kind of analysis.
So our mission today is to, filter this flurry of activity.
Mm.
We want to distill the core objectives and the political dynamics at play.
And what stands out right away is a clear division of labor, isn't it?
Absolutely. The House was driving this really aggressive legislative agenda, all focused on big economic bills. We're talking energy, infrastructure, financial markets.
Well, the Senate was doing something else entirely.
Completely. The Senate concentrated on its institutional duties. So a heavy emphasis on high-volume confirmations and advancing some very specific social legislation.
Okay, so let's start where the action was loudest. Let's start with that high-octane economic push coming out of the House.
That's good.
So to unpack the House's agenda, it seems it was all centered around speed and capital. The first big policy fight we saw was an overhaul of infrastructure permitting contained in House Resolution 31098, the Permit Act.
That's the one. That's really the key piece of legislation here. And it passed on a very tight partisan vote, 221 to 205.
And its objective is pretty radical.
It is. It's to accelerate these huge infrastructure projects by by drastically streamlining the permitting process under the Clean Water Act.
Accelerating projects usually means cutting some red tape, but what specific mechanisms are they using here that are causing all the friction?
They're targeting three major areas that have historically been, sources of delay. First, they are significantly limiting the scope of state-level review under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act.
And that's the part states have used to stall projects before, right?
Exactly. It's been used to effectively veto or, bog down major projects like pipelines. Second, they doubled the life of what are called nationwide permits, or NWPs.
From 5 years to?
To 10 years, which gives developers much, much greater planning certainty. And third, they codified certain permanent exclusions to the definition of waters of the United States, or WOTUS.
Okay.
Specifically, they extended the exclusion for prior converted cropland from 5 years to 10.
So limiting state authority and increasing permit lifespans, that provides certainty. But, the most aggressive move seems to be how they dealt with legal challenges. This bill doesn't just speed up the build, it speeds up the litigation, or tries to stop it entirely.
Precisely. This is where the bill really redefines the legal landscape. It establishes these very strict judicial review rules. Any challenges have to be filed within 30 days.
Just 30 days.
Just 30. And critically, courts are mandated to decide the case within 120 days. But the real game changer is who gets to sue in the first place.
With the standing, right?
Right. Standing. The right to sue is limited only to the project applicant or entities that can prove irreparable economic harm.
So if I'm understanding the sources correctly, that means an environmental group that's just concerned about, say, ecological damage, they might not have the standing to even bring a lawsuit.
That is the clear implication. It shifts the entire basis for litigation away from pure ecological stewardship and firmly toward economic injury.
It's a calculated move.
Absolutely. It's designed to prioritize economic momentum over the long legal battles that have defined big projects for decades. Now, to add a bit more color, they did adopt a couple of practical amendments.
Okay.
The Bean Amendment was accepted, which codifies dredge and fill programs for states like Florida, Michigan, and New Jersey. And also the Peters Amendment, which lets the International Boundary and Water Commission accept funds for cross-border wastewater treatment. Sort of a functional fix.
That sets the pace for development. Now, moving from water and land to pure power, the House followed up with House Resolution 3628, the State Planning for Reliability and Affordability Act. Another party line vote, 218 to 207.
Yes, and this one amends the Public Utility Regulatory Policies Act, or PRPA.
And it imposes a new mandate on state utility commissions.
A very strict one. It requires that they plan for reliable generation over a 10-year horizon. It mandates this planning process, but with a very specific, legally defined standard of what reliability means.
And that definition of reliable seems to be the entire point of the bill, doesn't it? It feels like they're legislating which technologies get preferred.
It absolutely does. The bill defines a reliable facility as one that can run continuously for a minimum of 30 consecutive days.
30 consecutive days.
Right. And if you connect the dots, critics argue this systematically favors traditional baseload power, so fossil fuels and nuclear, while creating huge hurdles for intermittent sources like wind and solar.
Unless they're paired with some, very expensive long-duration battery storage.
Exactly. Storage that can meet that incredibly demanding definition. And to make sure this has teeth, the Moore Amendment was adopted. It requires the GAO to review state plans to ensure they're complying with this new standard.
Okay, so this legislative sprint then moved to the infrastructure that delivers the power. House Resolution 3638, the Electric Supply Chain Act. This one passed with rare bipartisan support, 267 to 159.
It did.
Why did this bill manage to cross the political divide so easily?
Because the relevance is just undeniable. It's tied directly to national security and the future of the economy. The bill is explicitly linked to the coming explosion in electricity demand from AI and data centers.
Right, that makes sense.
So the requirement's simple. The Department of Energy has to conduct periodic assessments of the entire electricity supply chain. Generation, transmission, everything. It's seen as essential infrastructure protection.
And that national security focus was reinforced in the amendment, specifically targeting foreign adversaries.
That's right. The McGuire Amendment, it specifically calls out foreign entities of concern that might try to disrupt the supply chain to undermine U.S. leadership in AI.
So it frames grid security as a matter of technology dominance.
It does. And on the labor side, the Min Amendment was also adopted, focusing on integrating veterans and military spouses into the electricity workforce. So trying to solve two problems at once.
Shifting from the grid to capital markets, the House pushed through House Resolution 3383, the iInvest Act. And this passed with huge bipartisan support, 302 to 123. The goal here seems to be modernizing financial access.
Correct. For years, critics have argued that the rules for accessing private markets, where so much corporate growth happens now, are really outdated. This bill modernizes the definition of an accredited investor.
Which has traditionally just been about how much money you have.
Exactly. It was based almost exclusively on high wealth thresholds. The iInvest Act adds new pathways based on, say, professional expertise or specific licenses.
Okay, for listeners who might not track financial instruments every day, what's the practical significance of that change? And how does it connect to the other big part involving closed-end funds?
That's a great question. So the accredited investor definition is basically the gatekeeper for complex, high-risk private investments. By adding professional expertise, Congress is saying knowledge is just as valid as wealth.
I see.
The second piece, allowing closed-end funds, or CEFs, to invest more in private funds, that's key for indirect access. CEFs are publicly traded. So if they can invest in private companies, it gives everyday retail investors, through buying CEF shares, a way into opportunities they were completely locked out of before.
So it sort of democratizes access, even if indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone was comfortable with this expansion without more safeguards.
And that's the tension we saw in the failed WOTUS Amendment. It tried to impose stricter anti-money laundering and know-your-customer rules on investment advisors and hedge funds, especially for foreign clients.
But it failed.
It did. The debate was really about whether streamlining the flow of capital should take precedence over stringent oversight. And the House sided with deregulation and speed.
Okay, moving from economic structures to labor rights and politics, the House passed House Resolution 2550, the Protect America's Workforce Act, 231 to 195. The way this bill got to the floor is almost as important as what's in it.
That's so true. It reached the floor through a discharge petition, which is a rare procedural move to bypass committee leadership that might be blocking a bill.
And the substance is pretty monumental.
It is. It nullifies executive orders that were aimed at stripping collective bargaining rights from federal employees. Specifically, it targets the creation of the controversial Schedule F classification.
Which would have made thousands of career federal jobs into at-will positions.
Exactly. So by nullifying that, it reinforces the traditional protected civil service structure. And what was interesting was the bipartisan support. 20 Republican members voted yay.
That's a significant number on a bill like this.
It speaks volumes about the institutional support for a non-political career civil service.
And on the complete opposite end of the political spectrum, we saw a moment of political theater with House Resolution 939.
Yes, the resolution from Representative Al Green of Texas to impeach Donald John Trump.
And the House moved very quickly to quash that.
Immediately, they voted 237 to 140 to table it. But what's tactically interesting isn't just the big majority that killed it, but the 47 members who voted present.
A classic political maneuver.
A classic. It lets a member avoid alienating their base by not voting against impeachment while still making sure the resolution fails.
Okay, that wraps up a very busy sprint in the House. Let's shift our focus to the Senate, where things were much more about personnel and specific policy measures, starting with the judicial nominees.
The Senate was fulfilling its constitutional duty. They confirmed 3 federal district judges, Robert Chamberlain for Mississippi, William Crane for Louisiana, and James Maxwell also for Mississippi.
And the votes were all very close.
Extremely tight. All of them were between 49 and 51 yeas against 46 nays. In a chamber this divided, every judicial confirmation is a hard-fought battle.
And to speed up the non-judicial personnel, they used the en bloc maneuver.
Yes, through Senate Resolution 532. This allowed them to confirm dozens of administrative and diplomatic nominees all at once. It was a move to clear the decks before the end of the year.
And the
They did. Motions to proceed on 2 health care bills failed to get enough votes, effectively stalling them. But in contrast, they successfully advanced the big one, the National Defense Authorization Act, setting it up for a final vote.
Finally, let's turn to an area that might get less press, but represents really critical progress on historical issues: tribal sovereignty and memorials.
This was a hugely productive area for the Senate. First, they passed House Resolution 165, the bill concerning the Wounded Knee Memorial, passed by voice vote, and it's enormously significant.
What does it do?
It directs the Secretary of the Interior to place about 40 acres of land at the Wounded Knee site into what's called restricted fee status for the Oglala Sioux and Cheyenne River Sioux tribes.
And restricted fee status essentially protects it from outside pressures, correct?
It does. And crucially, the bill explicitly prohibits any commercial development or gaming on that land, ensuring it remains a sacred memorial site permanently.
What other legislation supporting Native communities was passed?
They address the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Crisis, the MMIP crisis, by passing Senate 390, the Begezies for Native Communities Act, which requires better coordination for federal law enforcement.
And they tackled a big economic bottleneck.
They did. Senate 723, the Tribal Trust Land Homeownership Act. This is a big deal. It addresses these systemic, historic, bureaucratic delays within the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
So what's the problem it's trying to solve?
For tribal members trying to get a mortgage using their land as collateral, the BIA approval process has historically been so slow it was basically impossible. This act requires the BIA to process mortgage packages by specific, enforceable deadlines. It's a direct move to facilitate home ownership and economic empowerment.
A great example of legislation cutting through federal red tape. And just for the record, we also saw a couple of other resolutions. Senate Resolution 535, congratulating the Las Vegas Aces on their WNBA championship.
And Senate Resolution 536, designating December 2nd, 2025 as World Nuclear Energy Day.
So when you synthesize the whole week, the contrast is pretty stark.
It really is. The House was focused on pushing big ideological goal speed with the Permit Act, shaping the energy economy with the Reliability Act. The Senate, meanwhile, was focused on pragmatic governance-clearing nominations and advancing these high-consensus social policies, especially the really critical measures on tribal sovereignty.
That simultaneous push really defined the year-end agenda, and it leaves us with major regulatory and economic policy shifts ready for the next stage.
It does. And it raises an important question for you, the listener, to think about. The Electric Supply Chain Act explicitly acknowledged the massive accelerating demands of AI.
Right.
But in the same week, the House created a legal definition of reliable generation that has to run continuously for 30 days. How quickly will that strict 30-day requirement become outdated by advances in battery and energy storage technology?
Technology that might not meet that 30-day test, but offers other kinds of reliability, like instantaneous response.
Exactly. You have this constant tension between a newly created legal definition and a rapidly changing technological reality.
A truly challenging thought about legislative foresight versus the speed of technology. Thank you for joining us for this look at the legislative activity of a very consequential week. We appreciate you being with us, and we encourage you to share your insights.